science. And I think, got it. I got a notification. I don't know if you guys did too. So I have this down as traditional Western science, just because I think it's really important to mention that, my experiences in Western science, and it was very much a departure from, research culture and then moving into science communication. But in other forms of science, which I don't know very well, it may not necessarily be a departure. Science communication, or any form of kind of telling a narrative, could be more important to different forms of science. And so it's just not something that I can touch on. So that's just, I think it's important to mention why I put that there. So just to talk a little bit about, what is science communication? Why is it important? And then I'll go into a little bit about, how I found SciComm and what it was like getting started and some of my experiences. And then I'll move on to my program, which is probably one of the most amazing experiences I've had in a long time. So I'm really excited to talk about that. And something that I was really excited about was that I was able to survey my fellow course mates, and I got their perspectives on science communication, where they started out and where they see themselves going. So I think that's really cool to kind of share that. And then if anyone has any more questions, you of course ask them throughout the presentation, but if anyone has any more questions at the end, we'll go through that. Okay, so what is science communication, and why is it important? So I have been working, I just recently started, I've been working at King's College in London, which is a really amazing experience. I was actually employed there to help out with their undergraduate program, and their undergraduate science communication program, and working with students and kind of putting my experience into the curriculum, which is really amazing. And I had a student come up to me a few weeks ago, and they were just starting off, and she was like, I don't really know what science communication is. So I think the most general example or definition of what it is it's any way an individual interacts with science. And I think as CaNOE members, we can really understand, that that's everywhere, and then why it's really important. So that can be something super traditional. That can be like books and magazines. I've got a cover of the National Geographic here. And, someone might take a look at this and go like, oh, that looks like nature. And then look a little bit longer and go, oh, that's an iceberg. Oh, that's a plastic bag. It's really weird how, sometimes plastic in our oceans look like, form elements of nature. And that in itself, like that conversation someone has in their head, that's science communication. And that's kind of the heart of it. We want people to have internal dialogue. And then there's other forms of non-traditional science communication, which could be, art and music, and video games even. So science communication is a huge field, and it's really just any way an individual interacts with science. So why is it important? I think it's definitely not a secret that science is a very elite and reserved or closed off institution. Scientists go through a really long process of training and, meeting other scientists and paying a lot of money in tuition, and kind of work their way to get into this elite club. I think, I don't know if anyone has experienced this, but I have a lot in my life, is that science is hidden behind paywalls. You'll see an article and then you'll click on the link that takes me to the scientific paper, and you can't read it. It's closed off. So we know that science is hidden away. However, something, especially with the pandemic, is science is everywhere. It's in politics, it's in media. Everyone's talking about science always. And like I said, the pandemic has really made that apparent. So there's kind of this clear discrepancy between this like elite society and yet the fact that it is constantly being talked about. It's constantly coming up in society. So science communication, and I think that's why what makes it super important is just making science accessible and bringing it to the public in a way where they can interact with it, learn it, digest it, and then use that knowledge in the way they see fit. So something that I think is really important to mention about science communication is that we are not science advertisers. And my program isn't to learn how to, advertise science blindly. It is also about holding science accountable because, as we know, there's definitely this negative history with science, especially even today, when it comes to gender and race in science. We're not just advertising it as this institution, but also science communicators are holding it accountable, which I think is really important. Okay, so what is the role of a science communicator during the climate crisis? So this is just kind of an example as to see, what are science communicators doing today? So I have a few examples here. I've got a picture of the cover of a podcast, Ologies. It's one of my favorites. She kind of every podcast she'll deconstruct the study of something, which I think is pretty cool. And then we've got the New Scientist. So these are definitely more traditional forms of media, but yeah, they've done an edition on global warming. And then you have kind of Vox Media, which is my favorite. I think they're based in the States, and they do a lot of social media and videos and online content. I'm not sure if they have a print magazine, but science communicators are everywhere, and especially during the climate crisis, they're just putting content out there, which I think is really amazing. The only issue, though, with all of these outlets is that the people that interact with them, for the most part, are people that already are interested in science. And especially with the climate crisis, that's not necessarily the audience that needs to be targeted all the time. Nobody's going to go pick up the New Scientist magazine if they don't already have a kind of interest in science. But there is this whole world of people that could care less about science and doesn't have that information or doesn't have access to that information that really is important in society when it comes to making decisions and interacting with media. And again, especially because of the pandemic, that is super apparent. I just have a little aside. When I was in my undergrad, I took a course on environmental ethics, and my professor, her name was Dr. Skitulski. She was my philosophy professor. And she would always tell us, she was like, I hate nature. I never want to go out in nature. I don't like it. I think it's gross, but I know I have a moral responsibility to protect it. And I have a duty as a citizen to do my part for the climate crisis and just protecting the environment. I think that's so amazing. We don't need everyone to love the ocean in CaNOE's context, but you definitely want people to understand that as a society, we have a responsibility to protect it. So if everyone could start talking about or thinking like Dr. Skitulski, that would be amazing. Okay, so this is just, I'm gonna give kind of a quick snapshot into some things that I'm learning, and it might kind of spark some ideas individually about how to talk about science and how to communicate science. So this is one of probably the most important things I've learned in my degree so far. And it's really about, how we teach or how we communicate and how we teach science to the public. So James Carey, who is a communications specialist, he's sociology and communications, and he came up with this model of communication. And there's transmission communication and there's ritual communication. And basically transmission is, it's what I'm doing right now. I'm sitting in front of an audience, there's a teacher and there's students, and it is a very linear process of learning. And so podcasts and magazines, those are all transmission forms of communication. And they're important. They're definitely important because, it's the quickest way to get information from point A to point B. However, something that we're really talking about in the field of science communication lately is the purpose of a ritual. And so ritual is a little bit harder to explain. And I apologize if this example is a weird topic, but the best way I can explain ritual is in the concept of an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, or a best way to explain transmission and ritual. So in this example, transmission would be if you had a bunch of people with the addiction sitting in a group, and you have a doctor or kind of a moderator telling the group about ways that they can kind of control their addiction. That would be a form of transmission. And that's, again, information getting from point A to point B. However, people that go to AA meetings, there's something to get from it more than just learning. It's this establishment of culture and community that is super important in supporting someone into their journey of dealing with their addiction. So, sharing your story and having people listen to that story and feeling as an individual like you're being heard, that creates community, and in that creates culture, and through that creates communication. I hope that makes sense. So an example, I'll just move on. So an example of ritual and transmission today in terms of science communication would be a lecture, but ritual would be like a museum. And it's not always necessarily ritual in a museum. You may have someone that just walks around and visits the different exhibits and then learns a bit of information and leaves. But museums are also a space of learning. So there may be an event hosted, or someone might turn to someone they've never met before and start talking about something. Museums cultivate this space of conversation. And the more that, people have this ritual in their lives of interacting with science, the more that it starts to become a part of their everyday lives. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. And I guess I'm gonna go on to talk a little bit about how I found science communication and how I got started with it. Yeah, 1 second, my thing's not working very well. Does anyone, I guess I can pause for a second. Does anyone have any questions? I can always just keep going. The concept of ritual and transmission can sometimes be a little bit interesting, but I think it's really important to kind of understand the difference between them. But it's okay, I'll move on. So I could talk for hours about how I found science communication, how I found marine biology in particular. So I basically am from Toronto, but I moved to the East Coast. And I went to the East Coast to study marine biology at Dow. And that came from this passion of ocean conservation and, wanting to preserve and protect our oceans. And something that's really amazing is that even through my transition from marine biology to SciComm, that has really stuck with me. I think it's kind of a driving force of, wanting to conserve the oceans and wanting to create meaningful change. But basically what led me to get into SciComm was I realized very quickly that I loved talking about science more than I actually loved research. And I think research is really amazing, and I think it's super important for ocean conservation. But I found more of a passion with kind of exploring and learning on my own, and going home and telling everyone about it. So I thought that was really interesting. And so from that, through my classes, I learned that, maybe this is a step, or this is a direction I want to take. So I did a co-op program when I was at Dow, and I took 3 really influential co-op placements, and they taught me something. Every placement taught me something different about science communication. So the first one, I was working at Supernova, and I don't know if anyone's ever been to Halifax or lived in Halifax or ever heard of Supernova, but it's basically these science camps for young students. And so a lot of that was developing curriculum. And then in the summer, we actually ended up teaching it to kids. And that was really amazing because I learned very quickly, how difficult it is to take something so complicated like my degree, and make that into digestible content, and make it fun and engaging in a way that students would really appreciate it. I also learned very quickly that working with children is not easy. um, yeah, so that was really amazing, and I think I started to kind of dip my toe into science communication when I did that. The second placement I did is I was working at the Discovery Center. And so again, that's in Halifax. And if anyone's never heard of it, it's this big science museum. And it's really hands-on. And something that was so amazing, I was working in the ocean gallery, and I had a little bit of science in there because I was taking care of some of the marine animals they had in the tanks. But I was also starting to ask questions about science and how the public interacted with science. So every day I would go in and I would take out the animals, and I would kind of interact with the public, even call people over and be like, hey, do you want to come look at a sea star? I can tell you some stuff about it. And that first allowed me to become really comfortable talking in front of an audience. But it also, it gave me an opportunity to ask people questions, to get a sense for what they already knew, what they liked about the ocean, and really feel like I was, that I had my hands in something that was, making a change and making a difference. So I thought that was really amazing. And in the same way, I would always, when the gallery was pretty empty, I would walk around and experience the museum, and start asking questions. The last thing that I did was I was working at the Ocean Tracking Network, and that is also part of DAL. And that was the most amazing experience. I was doing communications work for them. And that experience really started to get me involved in, what is it like working with social media? What works, what doesn't work? How can I say what I want to say, but make it really engaging from the start? I was writing a few articles for their website. And again, that really brought me into the world of communications, especially working for a nonprofit. The only issue was, while I loved doing that job, I really didn't know if any of the content I was putting out there was landing. And I think that's really starting to drive me on what I want to do post Imperial, is just really start to understand, how does the public interact with information, and what does the public know? What do they not know? What is really going to be useful for that main goal of driving ocean conservation? So what's next? So I did my undergrad, and I did those really amazing co-ops, and that's when I found Imperial. And then it was this 2 years of rush, I felt, of just prepping my background and trying to gain as much information as possible to really support me in the program that I didn't even know if I was going to get into yet. So I took some really cool courses like science leadership, environmental ethics, like I mentioned at the beginning, science in the media, and science education. I actually wrote a paper for science in the media, and it was about, the concept of, what does the public think of a scientist? And to explore that question, I analyzed movies like Frankenstein and Spider-Man, and I can't remember the other, Jurassic World. And I basically deconstructed the scientific characters and went through, what kind of messages that brings to the public. And if you have young children watching these movies, how does that influence how they see science in their future? So that was really cool. So yeah, it was this big rush to get all of the stuff. And then eventually I was accepted into Imperial. And I'll just talk a little bit about Imperial. I'm still in the process of doing the degree, so I can't really say much beyond from what I've already learned. But basically the program is 1 year, and it's structured in a way where you get a really good theoretical background, you get some practical experience, you do a work placement, which I haven't done yet, and then at the end it's this big dissertation. And I've just put here just some kind of questions that we're already asking in my program, which might kind of give a sense for what what is important to a science communicator, and how are we exploring the world? So what do I have here? I've got, how are risk and ethics connected? How does this relationship link to science? Ethics is a huge thing in science, and it's an important thing, obviously. But how are we talking about that? How are we communicating that to the public? Does the public understand what ethical boundaries scientists have? Are science communicators honest? Are they selective? This next one's about the nature of science. Science is theoretical, not fact. But how do you build trust in that? Science is ever changing. However, the public is always looking for that really concrete thing to move forward with. So that's a really important question. We talked about a little bit about ritual and how best can we create space for female-centered scientific discourse. That's also really important. So yeah, those are kind of the little bits of stuff that we're starting to learn. So I'm really excited to finish my degree, and I truly believe that, all of this work that I put into getting here and doing this is really paying off, and I'm really learning a lot, which is amazing. Okay. So just I might be running a bit long, but just to end this kind of session off, I want to talk about, what my peers say. I basically created this Google Forms, and I asked them a little bit about what they think about science. This question is, what field did they start in before coming to this course? And you've got some amazing ones. Obviously, biology, I think, was the biggest one. We have someone that was teaching. The history and philosophy of science was pretty cool, because they were coming from, already having this theoretical background of SciComm, which was really interesting. Cybersecurity, physics, climate science, bioarchaeology, which I had never heard of. So you definitely, in science communication, you can take it anywhere. No matter what you study in science or what interests, there's always a spot for you. This question I asked, what do you like about the field of science communication? And I think the biggest one here is questioning science and its role, and it cut out here, but it's questioning science and its role in society. So like I said at the beginning, we are not science advertisers, so we don't blindly preach science, but really understanding how the public interacts with it and where it sits in society is really interesting. Some other stuff, the opportunity for creativity, that is something I love about science communication, is that it's a creative outlet for me. The careers and opportunities, making a big impact. And some people put some other answers, like the ability and opportunity to bring humor into the sharing of scientific information, which I think is amazing. Being able to do that in a really engaging way is important, inspiring younger generations and learning about the media and media relationship to science. Okay, the next one. What challenges do you face when communicating science? So it's definitely not easy, especially, like I said, for those non-science curious people. You're really just skimming the surface. Some people have never really started to understand these concepts before, so it can be pretty tricky. You've got managing different opinions, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic. I think we can all understand that there's a lot of opinions going around. But yeah, it's really about kind of just giving them the tools to make their own decisions, but in a really accurate and scientifically sound way. Understanding and speaking on a specific topic can be difficult, capturing people's attention. But then some other people said, trying not to be vague and theoretical, because like I said, when I was working at Supernova, I had so much intense knowledge about marine biology, but I had to condense it and make it very digestible for young students, and even for adults. Dealing with people's often very solid preconceptions, kind of like managing different opinions, and then making people want to listen and engage. So being really engaging and getting people to pay attention is not always easy. It's just a few more slides left. So what career path are you interested in following after the course? So I think I had about 20 responses, and only 2 of them were they're unsure if they're going to fall into science communication, but everyone else seems to be really keen on following the path of SciComm. And so these are some kind of career paths you can take if anyone's interested in following SciComm. But you've got science writers kind of going into the communications field like I did when I was at the Ocean Tracking Network, a radio producer, which I went on the radio, or our school radio, on Monday, and that was a really amazing experience. I think it's so fun. But a radio producer, museum curator, documentary filmmaking. So yeah, like as you can see, there's so many places you can take SciComm, and I am still, even to this day, learning just like new opportunities and new pathways that I can take this degree with. So that's it. Thank you guys so much for listening. And I was just wondering if anyone has any questions. And if you don't have any questions now, you can always email me. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. That was fantastic. Well done.
Stop sharing.
Sure. You have a wonderful radio voice. I think you should do podcasts. It'd be fantastic together.
It was so fun. I went on just to talk about, my experience, but it was so fun to be on a radio. Like just even the setup was so cool.
It is fun. It's lots of fun.
And yeah, if definitely no questions now, but if anyone has any questions later, feel free to email me or get in touch. Yeah.
And I think what you're doing is so essential, going down the science path, especially in today's world with, right now thinking about COVID, right? How much miscommunication and how that information needs to be properly relayed is really critical. So it's a great that you're doing this, Sophia.
Yeah, we actually had a the journal Nature, like the kind of journal. So the editor of Nature magazine came and talked to us a few days ago, and that was interesting because she was kind of talking about how there's these misconceptions about science communication, but especially with the pandemic, like people are starting to understand now how important SciComm is. But it's really interesting to see that transition, especially even the editor of Nature to be like, yeah, it's there, and people are starting to make that understanding. Yeah, I'll put my email address in the chat. And then I think on the network, like on the CaNOE network, people can find my information as well, right?
They should be able to, yes.
Yeah, but I'll put this here anyway. Sofia Goulart. Here.
Does anybody have any questions or even comments? Or
there's some really nice comments in the chat.
Yeah, there's some wonderful things going through.
Yeah, okay. And then I guess I'll see some of you guys tomorrow at the meeting.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm just curious. So I know, like, did the science communication program at Laurentian here in Canada, and it's the only communication program in Canada. So I'm just curious about like what your program looks like.
Yeah. So I don't know. Like I knew Laurentian existed and I knew the program was there, and I don't know why I didn't like kind of look into it more. I think maybe I was just kind of like, you know what, I want to jet set to the UK.
Fair enough.
and like spend a lot of unnecessary money when you think about it. The international fees are crazy. But yeah, so the program is very, like I said, like very theoretical, but also hands-on. So to give a sense of what we're doing, the first semester we studied science representation in the media. So we were learning about kind of semiotics, how people, what it is like the life of a journalist, laws and regulations around science in the media. And then our other theoretical course was science and its social context. So that's kind of where I learned about ritual and transmission. We learned about Francis Bacon. Like we learned about a lot of philosophical aspects of SciComm. And then we were doing, my professor, he's a radio host for the BBC. And so he was getting us to kind of dip our toes into some of the like tech aspects of SciComm. So that was more practical stuff. So we were doing radio and pretending we were scientists and doing like TV interviews or something, which was kind of cool. And now I'm learning about narrative and ethics, which I got to choose. Just there was a bunch of courses and those ones where I'm interested in. And then next term, I'll be learning about science communication for development. So that has a lot to do with social justice and science, and especially about how, you know, like you can't have environmental justice without social justice. So I'm really excited about that course. And then I'll get into my work term, and then I'll start writing my dissertation, which I think I'll do my dissertation around kind of strategic communications like I was talking about, and kind of exploring that world. But yeah, that's about it.
Cool. How many people, like how big is the program?
So there's two sections to the program. There's the science communicators, that's the one I'm in, but there's also science media production. And there's about, I don't even know. It seems like a lot of us, but I also, especially after being online, I have no concept of numbers anymore. But I think it's like 30 of us in SciComm, and then maybe 20 in science media production. So it's not small, but it's also not that big.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm really excited for what's to come. Although a lot of people that took the course in the past, when they handed off the program almost, we introduced them and learned about the program, they were like, we're really sad to leave. Like this has been, and honestly, even so far, like this has been the biggest learning experience of my life. And especially being surrounded by people that have the same interest in me. It's really exciting. So yeah.
So
Are
it's
you
like,
online, Sophia? Sorry, yeah. Are you online, Sophia, your classes, or are they in person?
No, yeah, the UK is very, very weird right now. Like we definitely have high numbers, and yet nothing is shut down. And if anything, they've just dropped the mask mandates, and which I obviously still wear my mask everywhere. But yeah, no, everything's still in person, which is definitely a blessing, but I understand that there is a huge amount of risk in that. Mm-hmm.
yeah, I was just asking, is it a 2-year program or a year and a half with like your
A year.
dissertation?
It's
A
like
year. Oh, wow.
October to October, which means that it's definitely condensed and stressful at times, just very fast paced. But yeah, it is. It is exciting to know that, you know, in not too long, I'll be graduating, and then I'll be able to kind of move forward. Yeah.
Cool. Do you think you'd want to work in the UK, or would you come back to Canada or Portugal?
Or Portugal. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think I might want to spend a little bit of time in the UK, just because I'm learning a lot of UK specific things. Like I'm not taking policy, but like I can imagine there's certain elements of what I'm learning that I think might be really applicable. And I'm also making a lot of UK contacts. And then once I get a little bit more experience, then I think I'm definitely going to want to come back to Canada. Like I really miss home. So.
Cool, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm so happy that we got to do this.
Oh, sorry, last week didn't work out. Yeah. And it's great because everybody who's here was able to make it this week as well. Yeah, we appreciate the hiccup from last week, so that's great. And just another note, if anybody is interested in doing webinars, or if you know of somebody or one, we always welcome suggestions, so send them along. Our next webinar session will be on February 17th, and that is, I think, Annika Smithsonian and Megan Chen will be facilitating that session. So that's in a few weeks' time.
Exciting.
But thank you very much, Sophia. And if there is no further questions, yeah, I think we'll
sign off.
Okay.
Thank you, guys. I'll see you later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great, thanks, bye.